what is ready or not? Are you, most importantly, you guys ready? You've been ready? Yeah. I've been ready. Okay.
I'm ready.
All right, I'm not. Hold on one second. Okay. Good morning. The Finance Committee meeting is called to order Wednesday, April 24th at 9:57 due to some scheduling issues. We've been deterred. At this time, I'll accept a motion for a revised agenda.
Move approval of the agenda as revised.
Second.
All in favor signify by saying aye.
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 At this time, I'll accept a motion to approve the meeting minutes from yesterday. Thank you, Kaylin, April 23rd.
Motion to approve 4/23/24 meeting minutes.
Second.
All in favor signify by saying aye.
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 Okay, so for those listening, we have, and on Granicus, we have moved up ID 77-24, IT, to the quote-unquote morning slot. The enterprise fund is as scheduled. Okay, Brian, you can come to the front, help yourself to snacks. Introduce yourself.
Good morning. I'm Brian Packlin. I am the ITS manager for the city of Annapolis. All right. So a little bit about us. We are a team of 12, roughly organized into 4 groups. We've got our web services, which is the webmaster, and one of the edits I was making when I got the call was he's no longer an intern, he's a technician, so a web technician. Our analysis group is a group of 3. Our GIS group consists of the coordinator and a GIS technician. And our operations and support staff, lead engineer, 2 support specialists, and an admin support analyst. A little bit of history of the department with respect to the rest of the city. As you can see in the left graph, our staffing has remained fairly static while city staffing levels as a whole have grown pretty significantly, as well as the number of assets that we're responsible for, as well as tasks and maintenance that we are also responsible for. You'll see things down along the bottom axis there, things like door access for the buildings, ever increasing number of cell phones and mobile devices, laptops, obviously spurred on by the pandemic and telework. We've got many more people with PCs in front of them than we did in 2010. In 2010, I'm sorry, just to back up for a second, is kind of where we went back to, because that was the last time our department had a strategic plan. You can see, without going into too much detail, and I know
Brian,
that...
can you say that again? Who had a strategic plan?
The IT department in 2010.
Okay.
That was the last time we had a study and subsequent strategic plan done. So, yeah, I know we're a little crunched for time, so we're not going to get too much into the minutia, but as you can see here, our roles and responsibilities and the number of folks that we're helping have increased significantly since 2010. This is the slide in which I scare Sheila, where we talk about cyber attacks of municipalities and also in the private sector. And again, in the interest of time, we won't run through too many of these. I'm sure most of you have heard about most of them, but one of the overarching themes that you'll see here with municipalities on the left and private sector on the right is municipalities historically have been reluctant to pay the ransom, and at oftentimes terrible cost in money and labor and all of that. And you'll see some of these larger corporations, especially the larger corporations, have opted to pay the ransom, which, you know, a smaller organization like ours might not be in a position to do, depending on that ransom. So we kind of put this in there to, dovetail into this from the previous slide insofar as that we require funding and staffing, just like all the other departments, every other presentation you've heard this week, to maintain our level of, our ability to maintain best practices, best policies and procedures, stay on top of equipment and technology patches and things like that, to do our best to keep the city safe from these sorts of events. Some quick highlights. We're just going to hit on a few of these. I'm not going to sit here and read these slides to you. There's a lot in there. But
You have a half hour, Brian. I didn't want to rush you.
okay, no, it's okay. It wasn't my intent to go through these line by line.
Okay.
Our operations side, which again is our desktop support, help desk, network engineering, the nuts and bolts folks. Things that we've achieved so far this year, or will achieve by the end of the fiscal year. We're migrating all of our Munis ERP systems to brand new hardware running on virtual machines, which is also part of our goals to virtualize and shrink the footprint of the data center. So that falls in line well with that. There's we've rolled out the card access system for city facilities, where we've got almost every facility online with that, with the exception of a couple that are actually due for renovations. So we've gotten through that very, very successfully in the last year. We've rolled out a new cybersecurity awareness training program that we've gotten good participation in, with a little prodding to our departments, but we've gotten great buy-in from the department heads and the division chiefs, and they're really spurring their folks on to participate in this, and we feel like that goes a long way to help our end users, help us keep the city safe. We've rolled out a new mobile device management system. That's for our cell phones, iPads, things like that in the field. Those are also weak points that need extra attention. So we've upgraded and rolled out a new system for that as well. We're in the process of rolling out a new ticketing and knowledge base software for our internal operations, which should help us with reporting, and it should be a big assist to us with that internal knowledge base moving forward. And in this past fiscal year, obviously, the Hudson Street building came online, and we extended our network out there, brought phones, card access, PCs, Wi-Fi, all that good stuff out there. In the GIS, Geographical Information Systems side of the house, highlights of the highlights. We've launched the GIS Open Data Hub site. We have assisted or created the buffer management plan, stormwater dashboard in conjunction with the stormwater folks in Public Works. We've developed an inspection app for Public Works to inspect sewer and stormwater. And a nice little tidbit is Sean, our GIS coordinator, was appointed by Governor Moore to the state's Open Data Council, which we're very, very proud of. In addition to all the other amazing work that Sean and Josh turn out. So yeah, we're very proud of that.
That should be acknowledged.
From our analysis team, we are in the process, and we'll have completed by the end of June, a massive upgrade to not only, as we discussed in the operations side, to the hardware of our Munis ERP system. We are going through a major version upgrade to the actual ERP system itself. We're planning on a cut to live in just a couple of weeks. We've worked with purchasing and finance to showcase and provide training for the contracts module that will be rolled out here in the near future to hopefully assist those folks and streamline things. We are, the configuration is complete to have the ability to email utility bills to our constituents, and also begin electronically transferring funds for vendor payments. There's a couple of little things to work out with finance on that, and we'll hopefully be able to push that over the finish line very soon. NeoGov, this is a large software package that we're bringing online to do core HR, which is basically all of the functions of the Human Resources Department, along with applicant tracking, core payroll, time and attendance, and new employee onboarding. Time and attendance will go live on the first payroll of the new fiscal year, and onboarding will come shortly after that. Telestaff is a very complex time and attendance, timekeeping software suite that we're using for police and fire to track all of their very complex rules, policies, call outs for overtime, things of that nature. They are parallel testing along with their current routines and procedures now, and that should be going live shortly. The other side of our analysis house is Stephanie Connors, our EP&L, Permitting and Licensing Analyst. She handles the EnerGov project along with the processes that go along with that. As you can see in this list, she's extremely busy. She maintains that extremely complex system pretty much on her own. And I won't run through each and every one of these tasks that she takes on a regular basis, but you can see here numerous interactions with the applicants to try to help them and guide them through the process as necessary, helping planning and zoning, and more specifically the permitting department, refine their processes. So kind of like a meet in the middle type thing with the software and their processes. And that's an ongoing effort as well as we live with the system. Maintaining the violation list and the code case list as that changes. She's created and provided extensive documentation and instructions, not only for our internal staff, but for the end users, trying to assist that process as well. And at the same time that we do a cut to live with our Munis ERP system, we're also going to be cutting to live with a very significant upgrade to the EnerGov system, and she's been a big part of the implementation and testing of that upgrade. So we're very much looking forward to going live with that here shortly. Our web team, highlights out of this list, improved speed and responsiveness from the website, particularly on mobile devices. One of our accomplishments in recent fiscal years was to ensure that the entirety of the website was fully adaptive for mobile devices. So adaptive means, mobile devices come in all shapes, sizes, screen resolutions. The site has to be able to adapt and display that information clearly regardless of the device, and that requires back-end processing power and efficient code in the website. So that's been a big achievement so far this year, as well as improved SEO, which is search engine optimization. We want valid, legitimate city-sponsored links being the top responses when someone Googles something having to do with the city, and search engine optimization is how you achieve that. And we've gone a long way with that to try to increase organic traffic to the site. Also, complete redesign and launch of the boards and commissions project through the website. Planning has been completed for a new strategy to provide engaging content, keep the content fresh and relevant, and that strategy's been developed, and we're in the process of working with our content providers in each of the departments to get that rolling downhill. Of course, accessibility. You guys hear about accessibility of the website from us every year. We are ensuring that all of the new content that is being provided from our content providers from the department goes through a review process to make sure that our visually impaired visitors are able to access that information. And that's been a big success. It's still labor intensive on the webmaster's part to perform these reviews. We should probably really focus in on continuing education for our content providers so that there isn't as much of a review and edit process. It's not as labor intensive for the webmaster. But that's, again, in our goals and in our performance measures to try to enhance that training and get that a little more self-sufficient.
Hey, Brian, are we supposed to have access to that link? Because I just pressed it and it's like, I feel like I have all this power.
Yeah, it's just analytics. It's showing you where our visitors come from, how many unique visitors we get. Yeah, the fact that that's public is
public, okay.
intentional
Just check.
and a good thing to show
Okay.
what the city website, how it's performing, and frankly, what information is being accessed on a regular basis. So yeah, no, that is fully intentional, but thank you.
Thanks. Thank you, sorry.
And again, that last line is basically just underscoring the continuous work that we do with the departments, department heads, division chiefs, content providers, to make sure that we're putting the stuff out there that needs to be out there, and keeping the content fresh. These goals are probably going to look fairly familiar to you guys. They're relatively unchanged from last year. We want to continue to increase productivity by automating things that have historically been done, pen, paper, routing slips, things of that nature. And number two, improve public access to the GIS data. You'll see in the performance measures that we're getting a tremendous amount of hits to these layers, story maps, things that our GIS team are creating and making public, and we feel like we're putting a lot of really good information out there to the fingertips of anybody that needs it, constituents, developers, other government agencies. That stuff's all out there. Improve efficiency and the reliability of the data center. That's part of our virtualization project. Here shortly, we're actually going to be removing one of our 3 equipment racks. That's how far our virtualization and the data center consolidation has come. We've had 3 racks full of servers. We're going to actually be able to physically remove one of the racks. It's going to be empty, and we're going to create some space in the data center. So the energy usage, cooling load, things of that nature, and of course, the reliability is improving day by day. Developing a plan to make all city technology available to all of our citizens. That obviously falls with our webmaster team and has a lot to do with accessibility. And then keeping the environment safe. That's cybersecurity education, that's patch management, that's making sure that we're making time out of our day, that we're doing what we need to do to adhere to best practices that come from all the way to the feds, all the way down, to make sure that the city's data and computing environment remains safe. And these are also going to look fairly familiar. Increase productivity by reducing manual processes using automations. We're continuing to meet with departments, address needs. You may have seen Roz's email that we've automated the address verification portion of the online registration for recs and parks. These are the sorts of things that we want to meet with department heads and division chiefs and the rest of city staff and see where we can implement technology for internal quality of life purposes and to better provide these services to the constituents. The benchmarks that we use is the number of departments that we touch, that we reach, as far as who we're delivering these software modules to. Our goal was 3. And how many of these implementations are being completed in a particular fiscal year, and our goal was 4.
And who are those departments? Sorry.
Man, that was one of the things that I wanted to ask them about while I was waiting to come in. And I will get that information to you. No, it's okay. But yeah, I was refining the notes when I got the phone call. But yes, I'm happy to provide that information. I mean, I know off the top of my head, obviously it's finance, it's recreation, and planning and zoning. That was the 4th is the one that I was going to have to ask staff about, so I apologize for that. Goal number 2 is improving public access to the GIS data. We want to make easy to consume relevant data available, again, to constituents and whomever else might need it. And our GIS, the story maps, the layers, through our public portal is how we intend to get that done. The benchmarks are the number of publicly available applications, such as story maps, and the percent increase of the hits. And so GIS is a little weird. It's not as easy as just counting individual hits to certain pages on the city website, because these layers are shared and it is an open portal. We count the number of times the layers themselves have been hit, and those numbers tend to run up into the tens of thousands. So when you see the measures, it's not apples to apples, website hits versus layer hits, because you may hit, depending on the type of research that you're doing, you may hit one layer 20 times as you go through, and that would only count as one website hit. So it's a little weird there. But continuing to improve the efficiency of the reliability of the data center, as previously discussed. We're really driving hard towards virtualization, taking individual standalone servers, condensing them into larger virtual servers helps with redundancy, helps with our carbon footprint, both through electrical consumption and cooling. And it increases our flexibility and reduces the number of man hours that are spent doing migrations and things like that. So our goal was to get to 8 servers this year, and we'll reveal that here shortly. Making city technology available to all citizens is obviously ADA compliance. Usually we're talking about visually impaired. To our website, our benchmarks are we want to reach each fiscal year 5,000 pages in documents repaired, fixed, remediated, made compliant, and we want to continue to ensure that 100% of the content being posted to the site currently is ADA compliant. And goal number 5, the big one, keeping our environment safe, upright, functional, and secure. We do this through a number of things. We do this via training for our staff, keeping them abreast of latest techniques as far as intrusion detection and prevention, things of that nature. We do that through end-user cybersecurity awareness training. And again, that's that new Ningio program that we have put out. You guys may have seen. Folks have seemed to, we've got, again, through a little nudging, we've gotten some pretty good uptake on that. And instead of just one quick video a month, there's continued engagement from this product throughout the month. And we really feel like that can keep these sorts of topics top of mind. The other nice thing about this new product is they actually generate new content monthly, and it's very timely. So they'll hone in on something that you may have seen on the news, a breach or something like that, that is fairly recent. So, you're not talking about stale things that happened, some number of years ago. It really does tend to focus on things that are topical and timely. So our benchmarks are, as a whole, throughout the 12 of us, to reach 75 hours of training and education. We want to keep these PCs joined to the domain as we roll them out. We've done very well in getting the existing PCs on, and the new ones that go out are domain joined. And what that allows us to do is to implement a central security policy uniformly across all of our endpoints, and that's been a great success. And the measures are just quantifying these things that I just talked about. Our long-term goals in the FYs coming up, we want to continue to work towards our PC replacement. It's really all endpoints, servers, PCs, laptops, mobile devices, things of that nature. Make sure that they don't exceed 5 years old. Once a piece of equipment reaches 5 years old, generally the vendor will, be it the operating system or the hardware itself, will cease support on that. So you stop getting driver updates, you stop getting operating system updates. So it's imperative that we stay on top of our hardware situation, make sure that none of that gets too old so it falls out of support, and that's where breaches happen. That's where vulnerabilities lie. We've talked about this for a couple of years, developing and implementing an enterprise asset management system. This would be something that would overarch and reach into multiple departments. It could be enterprise asset management would be things like fleet. It could be the IT inventory. It could be fixed asset. There are products out there that will take all of that and put it under one roof. And that's a project as we gain A little bit of bandwidth in our analysis department or division, or whatever you want to call it. It's not really a formal division, but as we gain the capacity and the bandwidth to take on some larger projects, that's something that we want to embark upon. Continue to integrate the city and county GIS into a shared environment. So many folks, I mean, I'm sure many of our department representatives will tell you, it's kind of still surprising how many folks call and don't know if they're a city resident or if they're in the county. Just because you have an Annapolis mailing address doesn't mean that you're a city resident. So creating that overlap between city and county and making that information available on both sides of the house and making it clear, hey, this is city, hey, this is county. That remains a goal of our GIS team as we move forward. Hey, look, it's accessibility again in that bullet, so we want to continue to go that route. We want to make sure that we keep moving towards making the bulk of city services, where practical, online, available, easy to use, doesn't require downtown visits, doesn't require parking, doesn't require things of that nature. So that's still an overarching goal of ours to continue to move in that direction. One of the things I wanted to fix, and I was actually in the process of fixing when I got the phone calls, I've got 2 bullets in here about the chatbot for the city website. So we want to begin to explore ways to take advantage of generative AI. One of those examples would be an interactive chatbot on our city website, leveraging generative AI to make a more personalized end user experience to visitors and constituents and things of that nature. So that's definitely on our roadmap. Part of the NeoGov implementation is a managed training module, a learning management module, and it's what that will be is a centralized place where fire training, ongoing training, certifications, police, firearm certifications, things of that nature. Continuing education managed through human resources. Any sort of training and education stuff is managed in this learning management system, and that's going to be a centralized place where all of that can be tracked, implemented, and rolled out to our staff. So that's also on the horizon. We are very much looking forward to moving our GIS infrastructure from an on-prem solution, which it currently is now, to the cloud. And along with that, what you get is a more managed, a more managed solution where it doesn't take as many person hours from our GIS team and from our network operations team to manage these servers. They're patched, they're kept current. And then they're already parked out there in the cloud. We're not taking all this inbound traffic. That helps security on our end, and that also helps the speed and responsiveness of the services that we're providing. So that's actually coming up, hopefully, very, very soon. And then the Vertigis project will migrate all of our old online internal views into a new system, and that'll marry up nicely with the move to the cloud. And then, we really want to try part of that move to the cloud, and that managed solution will hopefully free up some staff time to start holding training sessions and help end users understand that it exists, understand how to use it. All of this wonderful data that our GIS team is creating, we want to raise awareness not only to the public, which is a stated goal of ours, but also to city staff to realize what's out there and how it can help them day to day. And our performance measures, we're just going to do this, I hope this is acceptable, we're just doing this in brief, we're not going to delve in too deeply. We just want to kind of hit on what was most successful and what was least successful. Most successful is we're continuing to further leverage our Tyler products, both EnerGov and the Munis ERP software. So we've rolled out 4 Munis modules to various city agencies. We have 3 departments that are deploying new software that doesn't just include the ERP, but things like the Rec and Parks thing that we had talked about earlier. Our GIS open data portal has gone fully live, and I really encourage you to visit that portion of the city website and explore. There's tons of really cool stuff in there. And as you can see, we've greatly increased the traffic to these sites. So awareness is getting out there. We've got almost 13,000 hits to the GIS portion of the site that provides that data. We've virtualized 7 servers, and that's to date. You know, we've got a few months left in this fiscal year, and we have some plans to even improve on that number before the end of June. And again, that's for all the reasons, that's good stuff for all the reasons listed earlier. And we are currently at 85 hours of security training completed. That's, I think, that probably would have got caught by me right about now too. That's 85 hours of training inside IT, and we actually have more on deck in the next couple of months. So yeah, we're trying to, we're not trying, we're doing well, keeping our internal IT staff up to speed with what's going on in the industry and making sure that they're engaged with their peers in their fields and that sort of thing. So performance measures that were least successfully completed. We didn't get quite, and we won't get quite where we want to be with alcoholic beverage licenses, and that's in our EnerGov EP&L software. And the short-term rental licenses, Jody can attest, that's a big work in progress, and we're trying really hard to get through that, but we don't foresee that being done by the end of the FY, but that's a work in progress. So that's a couple of places on the, or I'm sorry, and then the remediating existing content on the website. If our webmaster were here, she would tell you the sheer amount of data that's housed in our website in scanned PDFs, handwritten PDFs, things that have been scanned. Some of that stuff's almost impossible to remediate, and that's going to launch another discussion, and Vicki is very, the assistant city manager has very graciously offered to help us work on retention schedules and how, you know, the city website's not meant to be an eternal vault forever and ever and ever where something goes on and never comes off. So that'll be a big part of site remediation is tightening up, keeping the things that we're supposed to keep and losing the things that we are not legally obligated to keep. So again, we didn't quite get where we wanted to be on that one, but it's still a work in progress. I'm sure this is the part that you're most interested in. What we've got here is what we actually had in 23, our FY24 proposed and our FY25 proposed. The salary and benefits number for 25 is provided by finance, that's going to be the same as the other departments that have gone before me. We have no position ads in this upcoming FY, so that's just an organic number provided by finance. The number that may stand out to you is the increase in contractual services, which I'm going to be explaining here directly. But that's our most significant increase by far as we head into what we're proposing for FY25. Minor increase. One thing that you'll notice is the supplies budget. I believe the decision was made to combine that line item. So it used to be a distinct line item for supplies and another line item for training and education, and those have been combined. As Katie shakes her head no. Well, we combined them, and that's why that's higher. So no, we haven't had a big a significant increase in our training and education or supplies, but the subsequent slides dive into this a little deeper, so we'll be able to talk about that. You good? Okay. Again, very minor capital outlay changes. We're increasing some line items for miscellaneous equipment replacement, as you see here, the small peripherals, right? Webcam, speakers, monitors, things of that nature. We're continuing our effort to assist police. You know, I think we've talked in budget meetings past where historically, and for what I've heard from some of my colleagues, and this is the case across a lot of municipalities, is from a technological perspective, police department kind of operated in its own little orbit for quite a while. And with their help, we have really made great strides in kind of bringing them into the fold and making sure that they're treated like everybody else as far as getting their equipment upgrades and those sorts of things. We found that we were just a little bit short this year on that, so we've asked for an extra $10,000 to help with hardware replacements over there. And then an extra 10 just for PC and laptop replacements in general. With inflation, cost of silicon and copper and things like that, we're finding we're paying more per desktop and laptop and iPad and things like that, which is to be expected. So just a slight nudge upwards in our line item to keep those up to date. I don't, with your permission, I don't know that we necessarily need to talk about every one of these changes, especially some of the smaller ones there. A lot of these are year-over-year increases. Things like the 3,900 for SATA systems. Those are our Google Apps and Gmail accounts. We budget for slight increases. We've got positions within the city that hadn't historically had email addresses that their supervisors are finding it useful if they have city email. City staff is growing, so we got to budget in, the ability to grow with that. And then smaller things, price increases, that are baked into contracts, things like the Esri, Granicus, things of that nature. The big ones that I'm sure that you're going to want to talk about, where the large increase in contractual services for this upcoming fiscal year really come from two sources. One is the NeoGov software, on continuing onboarding and implementation there, as well as the additional support and maintenance. So we're in this transition period where we've got overlap in support and maintenance between our Tyler ERP system and the pieces of the Tyler ERP system that are being replaced by NeoGov. So we're in that transition period where we're kind of paying for two things at once, but it's not frivolous. It's necessary that we parallel these things and implement them correctly. So what you will find in FY26 is that you'll have a large line item for NeoGov, and then the line item for the support maintenance for the Tyler ERP solution will actually shrink in 24. Assuming these implementation efforts go to schedule and to plan. So that's a large chunk of the increase out of that 450,000. 178 of it is that. The other thing that I very much look forward to talking to you guys today about is the number 11 and number 12, which is general consulting services for really all divisions, all branches of the IT team. Specifically mentioned here are some pots for specifically the software analysts, and another pot for the GIS consulting. And before we start with the analysts, I'd like to note that the GIS consulting, that number includes what we anticipate it would cost to take on that project to move them to the cloud. So that's some increased ongoing costs, as well as the consulting services that we would require to move in that direction and get that job done. With regards to the line number 11 for the software analyst consulting, we have a relatively new addition to our team from the analysis side, which has proven to be tremendously helpful. However, with that being said, rather than do enhancement requests for additional staff this year, the stress levels, and I keep saying stress, that's not really the word I want to use, the level of effort being put forth by the analysis team, in particular in IT, is such that we kind of want to provide immediate, have something that could be implemented quickly. And what can we get our hands on quickly? Specific consultants to help in specific areas to get people over humps, over obstacles, over difficulties that they're having, instead of spending numerous in-house hours grinding and trying to get past it on our own. In the past, when we've had to reach out to consultants, it's been a robbing Peter to pay Paul thing. Like, we dip into other pots of money that we know we're going to have to account for later to bring in somebody to get us past a specific hurdle. What these are going to allow us to do is kind of retrain the staff of, you don't have to drive yourself crazy over this. You don't have to work 70 hours this week to get past this. You can reach out to these predefined, or maybe not predefined, vendor relationships that we have to bring them in and assist and get us past these things. And that, in my mind, provides immediate relief to the internal IT staff to be able to reach out to these folks and basically outsource some of that labor, some of that effort, some of that heartburn, and give them more immediate assistance than doing an enhancement request for an additional position. You then have to have that position created. It has to be, you guys do a great job of funding it, but all the things that have to happen after that, and then you onboard somebody and you bring them up to speed, that doesn't provide the sort of immediate relief that we would really like to be able to provide for our internal staff. So that's really those two things, that and the NeoGov overlap, are the things that you're going to see are really driving that increase in the contractual services number. And again, just to reiterate, one thing to bear in mind is that the NeoGov increase, that of course there will be an increase in contractual services. Not that entire $178,000 number won't just magically disappear in FY26, but that impact will be reduced in 26 because we won't be paying support and maintenance for the two products in parallel. The other things that probably bear mentioning in here, now that I've gotten the thing that was stressing me out the most out of the way, was we had $23,000 in our miscellaneous contractual services last year for ESET license renewals, but we pay those every 3 years. We buy them 3 years at a time. So that $23,000 is out. And then there's a $2,000 increase for the urban module in Esri. That's a GIS thing. We paid for that last year, and it didn't get utilized the way that we had hoped, so we're going to leave that out for this year. And the $50,000 for Tyler Technologies application maintenance and support, there's a baked-in 7% increase there, and that's on a pretty substantial support maintenance bill. That's that's a massive software suite. Support and maintenance is very expensive, so that line item has been increased. But again, that's where the overlap falls in with NeoGov. So the impacts to contract services should not be as significant in 26. And then the rest of it's, again, pretty incidental stuff that I included for your review when you get a chance to sit down and read this, but I don't know that I'll bore you to tears by going over all the minutia. Training and education is unchanged, except that with this NeoGov product, we'd like to, treat it like Tyler Connect is the big annual convention for Tyler Technologies, which, again, to reiterate, is our ERP solution, the Munis solution, and our permitting and licensing, Energov. So very much in the same way that we send our folks to this multi-day convention, for that, we'd like to do the same for this newly acquired NeoGov package. So that's just a $7,000 increase there to make sure that we're fully funded to be able to make sure that they're participating there. And there's no substantial changes outside of that. How'd I do? Did I go fast?
Yeah.
That was great. Okay, a little time management here. We're going to take a break at 10:55, a 5-minute break before the consultant comes. I'll let my colleagues go first with questions so I can judge the time better. Alderwoman Finlayson.
I'll go second. I still have a couple of minutes.
Alderwoman O'Neill.
Thank you very much. Just a couple questions. You started off the presentation saying that you have 12 staff, but the staff rank summary says 11.
So one of them is a part-time contractual position. That's the web technician. He works 18 hours a week, 20 hours a week. So when you look at a full-time staffing summary, you probably aren't going to see him. But he's very much a part of the team, and he's a tremendous help to our webmaster.
Okay. And then last year, we added the system analyst. Is that position filled?
Kinda.
Right.
It is funded, and with the assistance of the city manager, we have a stopgap solution, but that position has not been yet formally created, and has not been formally advertised or onboarded.
Okay. So that's why the grade is still to be determined?
Yes, ma'am.
So we don't have a job description or anything on that?
We have a description ready to go. It's a process.
Okay. And then my last question is in regards to the NeoGov and, no, not the NeoGov, the new software for planning and zoning.
EnerGov, yes, ma'am. Yeah, there's a lot of govs.
Yes.
OpenGov, NeoGov, EnerGov, yeah.
One of the issues that I had heard sort of in the background over the past year was that our staff is not necessarily comfortable with the new software. So it actually is adding time. Is there a plan for additional training on that?
Assistant City Manager.
Yes, absolutely. And part of this, I'm sorry?
No, go ahead. I was just going to chime in after you.
Okay. The assistant city manager has been a tremendous help. She's actually organized several meetings, numerous meetings, more than several, to kind of get us all in the same room and get through some of those challenges that we're having. But it also speaks to the consulting monies, the increased contractual services line items that we're talking about. We have actually already, using some of the turnover from the position that you previously discussed, brought in a consulting group that is working specifically with our analyst that works on EnerGov to ease some of the burden there, but also to address automations and things of that nature to get us moving in that direction. But yes, absolutely, measures are being taken to address that. And Ms. Buckland.
And what I was going to chime in with is that, so Vicki Buckland, Assistant City Manager, particularly for large tech projects like this, there's ownership that exists on both sides of that fence. IT has a role. The staff themselves have a role. And one of the things when I first came that I noticed was that one of the kind of staff side roles wasn't really being played, which is kind of that system owner, someone who really champions it, has the vision of what the system needs to do, what's most important to fix first. And one of the things that just for my observation that Chris Jakubiak has been really helpful with has been stepping into that role. Mm-hmm. And he has done some rearranging, as you've heard, in that department, but some of that has flowed over into how that staff interacts with the system and how they work with IT to address the issues they've been having. So is it where they want it to be? No, but I think they're also in a better place than they were, and I think there's a more of a sense that there's some light at the end of the tunnel, and that light is not an oncoming train.
Mr. City Manager?
Michael Malinoff, City Manager. Ms. Buckland's being modest, as she always is. Two things. One, planning and zoning was not in a good place when this came on, and there were no real owners of what was going on. And when Vicki came on, she identified that quickly, set up user groups, and really was a champion with the IT on making sure that that kind of ownership was created. And with Chris Jakubiak coming on board as the director, that's been galvanized. So it was really kind of an IT intervention, and the rest has followed, and I think is in a better place.
And we're grateful. We really are grateful for all the help.
That's good. So as a follow-up, so part of the consulting increase could be some of that additional support and assistance for helping that, not only that department, but anybody else that was.
Yes, ma'am. Yeah, these aren't earmarked. So They're not, the way that we have built our budget in the past would be a very specific line item for a very specific vendor for a very, very specific task. And we have found that that has really hampered our ability to be agile, to address problems as they come up, and then worry about, obviously, how to pay for it. That agility and the ability to respond quickly and bring on help. Mrs. Buckland made during a conversation she and I had a few weeks ago, keeps coming to my mind. Like, I probably don't need a database administrator 35 hours a week, 52 weeks a year, but when I need one, I need one. And that the ability to get one when I need one through these line items, I think is just going to be a tremendous help to the department.
So they're open-ended line items so that you need the database administrator or you need a,
I need an advanced network engineer. I need a database administrator. I need whomever, and that. It's very funny though, like the parts of our staff that have been with the city for a long time, which is a good chunk of them, have kind of been trained to grind it out themselves. And part of the challenge of this is going to be to train them to leverage this, should you be so kind as to approve it. But we're looking forward to it very, very much. So,
thank you.
yes, ma'am. Thank you.
Mr. City Manager?
Michael Malinoff, City Manager. Two things. One, what Brian is describing is what our state government does. I was the chief operating officer of Do-It, which is the state's IT agency, for about 2 years, and I got to see that close up. Truth be told, we really can't afford to hire a full-time person at that skill level, but this allows it to come in and out, and that's the way the state is able to work around their salary limitations, which are actually worse than ours. And the other thing is with Energov is there's other possibilities out there that we've talked about. Like one, Charles County, we use the same system, and we introduced kind of a portal system called Camino, and we've been talking about that too. We're not there yet, but that's sort of that system interface so the public has a more friendly gateway to whatever they're using.
Kind of like a plain English, how do I sort of system. And yeah, we're looking into that, and I'm looking forward to meeting with representatives of that company actually next week.
Thank you.
Alderwoman Finlayson?
Thank you. Morning, Mr. Packman.
Good morning.
The Alderwoman mentioned the position from last year that was funded, and that has not been, well, let me ask, is that the position that was in finance that's now in your department, or?
Yes,
So
ma'am.
how does that happen? And is that position posted for the rest of the city, or?
It will be.
How does that work?
It will be when it's created.
So the funding goes with the position? Is that what I'm hearing?
Mr. City Manager?
Michael Malinoff, City Manager. I think I have it all correct because Brian and I walked through this process closely, and I helped facilitate the movement of the position over. Part of it's through the class and compensation study that is just concluding or getting close to being concluded. And that's really where that is. And there was a real immediate need. And Brian came over, and Jody and the departments worked closely together, because it also created a good interface with finance that they needed to have that person be able to do that job over in OIT.
I see Ms. Dickinson shaking her head as if she's not in,
I wasn't shaking my head.
okay.
She was,
Here with my hand.
Ms.
Well, you
Dickinson
probably-
was very closely engaged in it and encouraged.
Yeah,
I don't want to put words in her mouth.
It's, they have funding for a position that's not yet fully created. They needed immediate help, and moving somebody there and to help them in the time being is a great help to us as well, because the lack of staff on their side was causing us issues in our staff. So we came up with a solution that's working for us, and then later the position will be fully advertised for filling.
You have to know that, staff talks to us and share their concerns. And this was a position that I've heard from several people because they feel it wasn't posted. Everybody didn't have an opportunity to take advantage of the position. I hear Ms. Dickinson saying you don't need that staff person, and Mr. Paquin does, and that works out. But then I hear we don't have enough staff, so I'm a little confused on that front. So anyway, you understand the concern, and what is normally not known by us, but those who are watching, meaning our city employees, see things that are happening and they're not included or they're not aware, and they are paying attention. So,
Yeah, typical advertisement, application, interview, onboarding protocols will be adhered to at the time of the position creation.
okay, well, I trust you to do that. Thank you.
Yes, ma'am. Thank you.
Tell me about your interface with the police department. Cameras, other equipment, I think it said unfilled position, posting of unfilled positions. One of the earlier slides. You work very closely with them, and I know the gentleman who had the position from there that worked in your department, and who's now gone.
Oh, are you talking about retired Sergeant Truitt?
Yes, yes.
Okay, so Sergeant Truitt retired from Annapolis City Police. Several months, maybe even close to a year after that, with the creation of the City Security Capital Improvement Project.
And I'm not questioning his move or his work. My question has to do with you're paying, it seems, for things that are police functions.
Could you give me an example of that, ma'am?
Cameras.
That the cameras are also a function of the capital improvement project. Those are being purchased with CIP funds. The labor being leveraged to install those are also being done through the CIP, not through the IT operating budget.
Okay, so do you manage in any capacity?
The capital improvement project? Yes, I've been tasked with managing that CIP. Yes, ma'am.
Okay. I just want to make sure that they're paying their share and it's not
Oh, I wouldn't let them get away with that.
out of your budget. Okay.
No, our relationship is healthier. The relationship from an IT perspective between Annapolis Police and the city IT department is stronger and healthier now than it has been in the 20-something years that I've been here. It's extremely, it works. It works well.
And I would say that that's probably attributable to you. So thank you very much. The ransomware, spyware, we're a municipality like the examples that you gave. Are your protections citywide? I mean, is it City Hall and all of our facilities? Is it on everybody's phone?
Are we going to do this again? Like last year?
I'm sorry?
No, I'm giving you a hard time, and I shouldn't. I'm sorry. No, the protection, the outreach is, it goes even further than that. It goes to the city-owned equipment that everybody carries around in their pockets, their cell phones, their iPads, the laptops that they take home. And as the workforce scatters out in the world and isn't sitting in a cubicle in City Hall, no, those challenges continue to grow. We feel that we're up to it. We work very closely with partners in the state, our fellow local municipalities, including Anne Arundel County, to do the best we can to adhere to best practices, fairly mandated security protocols, things of that nature. But no, the landscape changes constantly. And really in the last 5 years, it leaves this building and ends up in your living room. And that poses its own set of challenges.
And I'm sure I ask this question every year, so please forgive my repetitiveness. Granicus versus Munis. When shall the ever two come together?
In what way?
Well, on our iPads, we go to Granicus, I go to Granicus to get into our documents. But sometimes that doesn't work, and then you have to go the other longer route through Munis. And so,
No, I don't believe it's Munis, ma'am.
okay, well, it's in Legistar. Okay, so will they ever coordinate?
That would rely very heavily on the parent company that produces those two products. But I am not aware of any immediate plans to merge those two products.
Would it make sense to have one system and only one?
They are parts, they are two pieces of one system, if that makes any sense. And the interface at times can feel a little wonky, as our colleague, Mr. Arnett, loudly proclaims from time to time. As I've told Alderman Arnett, and I'll tell you guys the same when it comes to that, I would like to have a talk with, obviously there's a lot of pieces, right? There's the city clerk, there's the Office of Law, that system touches a lot of people, the webmaster. But I'm willing to entertain conversations with those things. That's part of one of our stated goals, right, is to work with the city departments to figure out how we can make things better. And I'm 100% willing to have that conversation.
My last question, I have a couple of others, but I'll ask you personally. Enhancements. Were all of your enhancements included in the mayor's proposed budget?
I did not offer any enhancements this year.
Oh, okay. Well, you make it very easy, don't you?
I try.
Okay. Thank you very much. Oh, and congratulate Sean, please.
I certainly will. Thank you.
Thank you, Brian. Number one, for coming in early, and also number two, to scanning my brain cells in that picture there. In the interest of time, I will put my questions on the Google Drive Q&A, and because I think I want your answers to be memorialized as far as how we proceed further in the interface between you and these departments that you're spending a lot of resources on. And if I understand your ad in a nutshell, what you're trying to do, because I heard the word immediacy about 5 times in the presentation, that's what's driving this, is that you want to be able to turn around and get in that bucket of money, the zero in on what consultant do I need, and get them in here and take care of the problem so that you continue to work efficiently instead of adding a position that probably will bore the heck out of somebody for 8 hours a day. So I think I get it. But in the interest of time, 1 minute response and then we'll conclude.
Certainly. Yeah, again, immediacy. Yes, that's the crux of it. We want to grow this staff. I don't want anybody to think that this is FY25. This is the creation of this funding source to provide immediate help. There probably will be enhancements requests in 26 for additional staff, not only to increase the bandwidth of these branches of our department, but also we really have big gaps in kind of a lower tier staff level and upper tier staff level. And in the long run, I want to build some tiny little ladders in there to be able to let people grow without having to leave the organization. But that's a year from now. So that's the short answer.
Okay. All right. Well, thank you very much.
Thank you all very much.
Okay. So with that, we're going to take a 5-minute recess. The consultant is here. That will give him time to set up. So I had to wake my, don't mind me, I had 2 cups of For reconvening. Our heads are spinning. It was like speed dating yesterday with the community grants, and we go from that to IT and your presentation. So this is interesting. So without further to waiting for the staff to be quiet. Without further ado, you can, and I apologize for the wait, you just time limits, you have an hour, which at the most, I think, and we'll have about 15 minutes of questions. So try to finish it by noon. Does that work for everybody? Noon, 12? Okay. So
All right.
when you're ready.
Sounds great. Is it,
No, I know. That's why I'm not going first
can we
anymore.
bring it up? I think the presentation just needs to come up. Oh, there we go. It's not mine.
It's our computer. Yeah, it's up on the screen. No, this is the studio computer. It's their presentation. Okay. She's
Okay.
Is it full screen? Let's see if I can this one.
Sure. There it is. All right. Perfect. All right. Well, good morning. My name's Dave Heider. I'm a senior principal with Stantec.
Marcia Patrick, Assistant Director of Public Works.
Thank you.
All right. And I'm here this morning to take you through the fiscal year 2025 Enterprise Fund Rate Studies. And I will go through, and I'd be fine to take questions as I go along if you'd like, or we can save those till the end.
We're saving them to the end.
Okay, perfect.
Yeah.
So what we're going to talk about today, first off would be the Water and Sewer Fund, and then we'll talk about the Stormwater Fund, and then wrap up with the Refuse Fund. And so the process that we go through in terms of the financial plan development is really three key steps. The first step is that for each of these funds, we're identifying the revenue requirements, and we're looking out over a 10-year projection period. And what the revenue requirements essentially represent are your expenses of operating these systems. So we use the fiscal year 25 proposed budget as our starting point, and then we're escalating that forward year over year to look out over a 10-year period again, based on various cost indices, inflation factors, input from staff in terms of known cost changes. We're also factoring any existing debt service. So when you've issued bonds in the past and you have to repay those factor into the revenue requirements, as well as the capital improvement plan. So any plans you have for capital investments in the system going forward, and some of those may be cash funded and some may be funded with future debt. We then take that and compare that with a revenue forecast. So what are your revenues for each of these systems based upon the various rates and fees, forecasting in system demands, customer growth. So we get a sense of what the revenues on the system are going to be over the next 10 years. And then we compare the two. Are your revenues sufficient to meet your revenue requirements? And if they're not, how does that hit our key metrics, particularly your minimum reserve balances within each of the funds? So that's the overall process, and we're going to go through that for each of the funds. And the first one here for the water and sewer system, I just want to start off and show you the fiscal year 25 water revenue requirements. And so these are the key components of the revenue requirements. So your operating maintenance costs, that's the day-to-day operations of the system. So that's personnel, that's chemicals, that's energy, operations of the water treatment plant. And that totals about $6 million, makes up about 52% of the total. You also have planned cash-funded capital projects. So rehab and rehabilitation of the distribution system lines, things of that sort. And then as I mentioned, you also have existing debt payments. So about $3.5 million is what's scheduled for debt payments in fiscal year 25. So that in total is about $11.5 million in revenue requirements for the water system. For the sewer system, you can see a bigger component making up about 80% is the operating and maintenance costs. It's about $7.2 million. You do have replacement of lines, the collection system lines of about 7% or $675,000. And then there's also less debt. On the sewer side, about $1.1 million in terms of annual debt service. So that's a snapshot of fiscal year 25. As I mentioned, the next step is then to look at what we often term a revenue sufficiency. So we forecast over a 10-year period the revenue requirements, and then we compare that with the revenues with current rates. And so this is for the water system. Again, you can see the fiscal year 25 costs at total expenses of about $11.8 million. And then as we play that forward, you can see year over year that by the end of the projection period, by fiscal year 34, we're at about $15 million in operating costs. I'm sorry, in total costs. You can see the individual line items, what's included in those. Operation costs go up based on inflation and other factors. We factor in your actual capital improvement plan as well as your debt service payments year over year. And the really important comparison is to look at the last two lines, which is your current water revenues. So we're looking at water revenues in fiscal year 25 without any rate increases of about $8.87 million in comparison to expenses of about $11.86 million. And then as we play that forward, our costs are increasing if we don't adjust rates. Obviously, our revenues are going to be flat, and therefore there's a divergence between expenses and revenues going year over year. Similarly, on the sewer side, we forecast over a 10-year period, so total cost about $9.2 million in fiscal year 25. We're estimating that's going to increase to about $11.7 million by the end of the projection period in 2034. Again, there's less of a divergence on the sewer side, so your revenues are about $1 million less than your expenses in fiscal year 25. Again, this is with no rate adjustments. And then as we play that forward, you can see as your costs grow, there is a spread that happens between your revenues and expenditures. And so the next step is to essentially look at our key metrics, and that's really wanting to maintain a certain amount of cash within each of the operating funds. And so this is the operating fund for the water fund. And you can see that right now you have about $14 million in cash. That's what we're estimating by the end of fiscal year 24. But year over year, as those revenues and expenditures diverge, we would be eating into the cash balance. We'd like to maintain at least 6 months of operating revenues in that fund, and that's the minimum balance, so that's the black line. Essentially, with no rate adjustments, we're showing you'd fall below that minimum balance in fiscal year 28, and then we would go negative by 29, and then obviously further and further negative. And that's just demonstrating the pressure on the water fund. Then on the sewer side, similarly, you got about $15 million. We're projecting by the end of fiscal year 24. If you remember, the delta between the revenues and expenditures was less, so the period in time to which before we reach that minimum balance is longer, but we are showing by fiscal year 23, you drop below that balance. And then with no rate adjustments, you would deplete all funds by fiscal year 33. So as we look to address these issues, our recommendations are that we do need to adjust water and sewer rates. For fiscal year 25, what we're recommending would be a 4.75% increase in the water rates, higher than what's required on the sewer rates because of the pressure we're seeing on the water side. And then on the sewer side, we're recommending a 3% increase. In each subsequent year, we're thinking that you're going to continue to need to make rate adjustments, although the city does look at these every single year. But we do believe you're going to have to continue to increase revenues through rate increases over time to bring revenues and expenditures into alignment. And that's likely going to continue into the future as well. And so with the rate adjustments, slide 12 here shows we're still going to be using cash balance within the water system. We're attempting to have stable and predictable rate adjustments. So we're not immediately increasing to get revenues to match expenditures. We would be drawing down on the balances. This trend is a trend we've seen in the past and we've talked about in the past. And each year we just kind of keep pushing that point at which we fall below that minimum balance out into the future. But we do believe, again, that you need to increase water rates, and we'll likely need to in the future to maintain the cash balances. On the sewer side, with the 3%, again, less pressure on the sewer side, so this while you would be using some cash balances going forward with the 3% increases that we're recommending, you would stay above that 6-month minimum target. And then finally, I want to just show, this is the combined balance. So it is an enterprise fund, water and sewer. When we look at them together with the rate adjustments that are being recommended, over a 10-year forecast period, you would not ever go negative with these rate increases. We drop a little bit below that minimum balance by fiscal year 23. But again, on a combined basis, this rate plan allows you to maintain the cash balances while minimizing the rate increases and using up some of that available cash. So slide 15 shows what the recommended fiscal year 25 water and sewer rates look like. So this, again, increasing water rates, both the fixed charge and the usage charges by 4.75%, and the sewer rates by 3%. If you recall, the way that you currently charge is you do have a fixed charge based on your meter size. So the larger your meter is, the more water you can demand on the system, and therefore the fixed charge you pay regardless of use scales with your meter size. Typical residential customer has a 1 inch or less, so the fixed charge for residential customers per quarter is $14.43 and $14.26 for sewer. And then on the usage rates, you do have for residential customers what's called an inclining block rate. So the more water you use, the more expensive it becomes. The first 7,000 gallons would be charged at $4.55, and then over 7,000 to 20,000 would be $9.12. And then if you use a lot of water per quarter and you go over 20,000 gallons, each of those 1,000 gallons would be at $13.66. Non-residential customers are charged kind of in the middle of the tiers at $6.78. And then your sewer rates are just per metered 1,000 gallons at $6.27. So with these rate adjustments, we have a typical customer bill. So your typical residential customer uses about 12,000 gallons per quarter. The current combined bill per quarter is about $175. You can see the makeup in blue of water versus sewer, about $87 for water, $86 for sewer. So with these rate increases, the 4.75 and the 3%, that would result in about $6.80 per quarter increase to your typical single-family customer in fiscal year 25. So a little bit more than $2 per month in terms of a typical customer bill. And then final slide on the water side, water and sewer side, is just a comparison of some surrounding jurisdictions, what a typical bill is for single-family customer using 12,000 gallons. Again, you can see the current bill for City of Annapolis, about 175, would go up to 181. And within these comparisons, you're certainly at the lower end of the range. It is important to note that the comparison communities are current rates, and so we don't necessarily know what other jurisdictions are going to do in fiscal year 25. I'm pretty certain that Anne Arundel County is going to be increasing the rates, as well as most of these other jurisdictions typically increase rates at least at 3 to 5% on an annual basis. So it's somewhat of an apples to oranges comparison.
Can you add an asterisk to that slide for the record and saying that?
Certainly. Yep.
Thank you.
Can we ask questions now, or?
I didn't, that was just just clarification before we move forward. It was going to get lost, but that's really important to know.
Okay.
Do you want a break now for the water sewer? Is that what you're saying?
Yeah.
Yeah.
Sure.
Okay. Questions on water and sewer? Alderwoman Finlayson?
Yes, thank you. I'm looking at page 16, a graph, and it looks like $8 difference, or less than that, actually, $6.80. Is that quarterly?
That is quarterly.
Okay, so the increase annually is going to be 4 times that amount.
Correct.
Okay.
Yep.
But this chart only shows the quarterly.
Correct.
Okay, I just want to be clear about
Yep.
that. What would happen if, and I'm on the sewer portion, back to page 10, if we don't increase the sewer cost until around 2030 or 2031 or even 2032, when we get extremely low on the fund balance.
So what would likely happen, and we can run that scenario and report back, is you'd probably need a double-digit increase because essentially your expenditures and revenues are diverging over that period of time. You're drawing down your balance. And so to immediately get your revenues up to where they need to be to make sure you don't deplete your cash balances, you need to do a pretty significant increase. And so historically, we've talked about slow and steady and predictable increases versus waiting and then doing a really sizable increase.
And what's our desirable fund balance?
So we
What's the
target 6
percentage?
months of your operating and maintenance expenses.
Isn't there a percentage that we try to keep our fund balance at? Is it 15% or?
Jody?
There was at some point in time in our policy a code of a target fund balance. This 6 months, it would be half of your operating expenses, 6 out of 12 months of operating expenses. This is much more conservative.
Okay,
Then
but
what
we
we
did have a
recommend.
minimum.
We
goal
have a
with that.
minimum, I don't recall what it is, but we're always above that. And I would, and anything for operating a system like this, I wouldn't recommend anything lower than what we have here. You want to make sure you have cash reserves for 6 months of expenses.
Okay, I'm just looking at what the impact would be if we did, if we delayed the increase. So, okay, thank you, sir.
Certainly.
Alderman O'Neill, do you have questions on water and sewer? I have some brief questions on water and sewer. What is the inflation that you have in your numbers today versus last year? What are you carrying for inflation?
Yes. So in our forecast of revenue requirements, we are including inflation at a line item by line item level. So it ranges anywhere from 3 to 6% in terms of those
Six
factors.
being the highest, okay.
Yep.
I think it's important, unless Marcia, you're able to speak to this, before we leave water and sewer, what's driving this up, obviously, is an increased debt service, which ties into the projects, if I understand, okay? So I think the public needs to know what's driving that, in what capital project, can you speak to that? Deb, do you know what I'm asking? Okay. I mean, if I'm making, what? Oh, okay. If I'm making the correct assumption, right? Am I making the correct assumption?
Yeah,
Is
it is a combination of your demands on the system are flat, so you're not really seeing any growth in customer
That's a
usage.
flat line, correct.
So that's flat.
Yep.
And so your operation costs go up based on inflation. So you
That's
do
what
have
the inflation is, got it.
and then you're also reinvesting in the system. And so the combination of the inflation and the reinvestment in the system, which is reflected in the future debt as well as your existing debt, does drive the system.
So, Joan, so the projected debt service increase,
Correct.
Director Dickinson?
Yes, Jody Dickinson, Finance Director. I think what they're saying is there's increase in debt service.
Correct.
There's also an increase in operating expenses. You know, even the wages that we pay the people that work in the system are going up
Yeah.
3 to 4%
That's what I was asking
annually.
about inflation.
And so that's driving both of them, not just debt service.
Okay, so let's just talk about that debt service as it relates to what's going on out there and why. Can we speak to that before we move on to Storm? Director Burr.
Bert Vogel, Public Works Director. May we confer amongst the team for a quick second?
Yes,
Yes, we're going to turn the mics off. Okay.
Wait, they can do that, I don't know. Like on,
Are you suggesting that the increase is related to the increase in capital projects?
I don't know, I think so, part of
Okay,
it.
that's what I thought
Yeah, okay, yeah,
you were asking.
yeah, and that's why they're here. I mean, and it's,
The debt service increased almost 50%
I know.
over last year.
I know, and the inflation,
Last year's was 28,
yeah,
today-
and-
this year's is 50.
yeah, we have to be on mic here. Okay.
So I'm gonna take a crack at the answer.
Let's have it first.
Right, what's that? The question that I heard was, what is driving the increase in debt service, right? And of course, we know that that's related to capital projects. There are two things that are going on there. One is pure inflation. I expect that's going to be on the higher end of the range that you talked about, 3 to 6. So that's probably in the 5% range. But we're also planning additional projects.
Time out. Why is that 3 to 6? When you do the math for next year, don't you just say, okay, it's 6 or 4 or 5, sir?
Yeah, so when I'm saying 3 to 6, I'm talking about the operating costs. So, staff, we're assuming a certain inflation factor. Chemicals, might be 6% because of the increase we've seen there.
So it's other stuff, so you can't do a straight line.
Yeah,
inflation
typically when we look at the capital, we're looking at using the engineer record E&R index, which is tracked around 3.5%. And so that would be factored into the capital side.
Okay. Sorry to interrupt, Director Vogel.
No, that was the end of my answer.
So yes.
Yeah, let's ask. Go ahead.
So I think the question is it because we have an increase in capital projects that this increase is occurring?
Yes, that is part of it. I think there are two main drivers to the increase in debt service. One is inflation. Cost per foot of waterline replacement will simply go up as a result of inflation. Mr. Hyder said he's using 3.6 or 4%. The other piece is we plan to do more feet, right? Additional work. So yes.
Okay, I guess the next question would be, if we chose to not allow our debt service to increase, that would mean that we would restrict, I'll say, capital projects.
That is correct. We would do less capital projects.
Okay, thank you.
Raising my hand. Could you give us an example of a project?
Eastport waterline replacement phase 2, but it's just now wrapping up.
Okay.
And so when we don't do capital projects in the water system, we have more water main breaks, we have more service interruptions, and we have more water losses.
Okay. Alderman O'Neill, do you have any follow-up?
That makes sense to me.
Okay. All right, let's move on to storm. Yeah.
Thank you, Madam Chair. A former county finance director who lives in the city will be sure to call me and ask why Annapolis water is more expensive than county water. Do you have a quick answer for that?
I can take a stab. Part of it is just, I'd say the biggest component is probably economies of scale, just in terms of they have a significantly larger customer base. They actually are growing pretty substantially in terms of spreading those costs over more and more connections over time. So that's I'd probably say 95% of the difference is because of that. Yep.
Glad that person's calling you and not me. Any other questions before we leave water and sewer? All right, we're going into storm.
All right, Stormwater Enterprise Fund. So similarly, wanted to show you the fiscal year 25 stormwater revenue requirements. And that's made up of the similar components, operating and maintenance expenses, which total about 1.6 million, makes up about 75% of the total. Then we have existing and future debt service, makes up about 12%, so $261,000. And then any cash funded capital at $275,000 in fiscal year 25. Couple items to note as we get into the stormwater is that the CIP spending has increased over the past couple of years. For a number of years we were looking and it looked like things hadn't gotten started, but now over the past couple of years, the spending has certainly picked up. The future CIP will primarily be borrowed, given what we're seeing in terms of the pressure on the stormwater funds. That means that we'd likely issue debt service. And then O&M costs, they've increased about 4% in total over the fiscal year 24 budget. And so as we look at the stormwater revenue sufficiency, similarly, we have the operating costs up at the top. And again, we're inflating operating cost at a line item by line item level, going from 1.6 million to about 2.13 million in fiscal year 24. You do have a little bit of cash funded capital. We have existing debt on the storm fund as well as some future debt as you're completing projects. So that gives us our total expenditures of the 2.15 million in fiscal year 25, forecasted to increase to about 4.41 by fiscal year 2034. And similar to what we saw on the water and sewer side, the current revenues for the stormwater system are below the expenditures. They're just slightly below in fiscal year 25. But as we go forward, if we don't change the stormwater fees, we would see a greater and greater divergence over time. And the next slide is fairly dramatic in terms of the fact that we're forecasting at the end of fiscal year 24, there essentially be no balance within the stormwater fund. So just very, very slightly positive. Obviously, given that expenditures over revenues, if you don't adjust stormwater fees, you would deplete the funds, and they would even more dramatically, it would go significantly negative. And so what's recommended is that given the need to restore the cash balances, meet the capital needs within the stormwater system, we are recommending a 15% increase in stormwater fees in fiscal year 25, and then would recommend that you do 2 more years of 15% in 26 and 27, and then likely in future years you'd need to do on the range of 7 or less percent increase in the future. And what this would do would essentially restore the cash balances. We'd meet our minimum target by fiscal year 27. As you can see, we're building up. As I mentioned earlier, you do adjust and evaluate rates on an annual basis. So if you are exceeding the minimum balance too substantially, you wouldn't have to do those future rate increases. But we do believe that you need to do some pretty substantial increases here over the next couple years. And what that looks like in terms of the stormwater fees. This slide shows your current quarterly stormwater fees. The way that you charge is single family are charged currently $22.85 per quarter. That would go to $26.27 per quarter. Multifamily are charged per unit at half of what the single family pay. That would go to $13.13. And then your non-residential customers are charged in tiers of impervious area. So the measured impervious on their property, and then you can see the range of increases with the 15%. In terms of the comparison with other jurisdictions, again, this is current Annapolis rates plus what we're recommending with the 15% increases compared to what other jurisdictions are charging currently. And so you can see you are towards the bottom of the range. And again, we can add an asterisk to this that mentions that these are the fiscal year 24 rates or fees for the surrounding jurisdictions. So I'm going to shift gears just a little bit and talk about the stormwater fee structure, because this was another item that we were tasked with, and then we can talk about the increase. But the concept of stormwater fees is that they're charged based upon the impervious area on a parcel, because impervious area impacts the management of stormwater. The more impervious area you have, the more runoff that it generates and the more it impacts the system. And so generally you want to align your stormwater charges or fees with impervious. And as I mentioned, this is the current structure as it stands today. You largely do that in that, customers are charged based upon their impervious area. When it comes to residential customers, single family and multifamily, you charge based upon the median impervious area. So everybody's treated the same if you're single family. If you're multifamily, it's per unit. And that approach, quite honestly, is very, very common because of the kind of the normative nature and the homogeneous nature of what you see between single family and multifamily in terms of their impervious. But what you have on the non-residential side with the tiers is a little bit more unique. And that one of the issues with it is that you do see a wide variation in impervious area amongst your non-residential customers. Somebody that's in that over 80,000 square feet impervious could have 80,000 square feet, or they could have 2 million square feet of impervious.
Just for clarification, you're talking about building footprint?
Yes.
Increased building footprint, okay.
It's building footprint as well as parking lot, anything that would be impermeable, impervious area. And so the next,
Listening. Sorry, we have a colleague that's very passionate about that. Go ahead.
yes, yep.
Go ahead, sorry to interrupt.
And so the next slide just shows the distribution of these are all your parcels that are considered non-residential and the impervious area. And I realize it's a little bit hard to see, but you can see in the colors, as I mentioned, once you're in that 80,000 square feet range, you have people that have 80,000 square feet and people that have over 145,000 square feet of impervious. So a wide range. And so what we would recommend is over the next year, consider changing the non-residential fee structure. And what this would do essentially would move you similar to what the county does and a lot of other cities in Maryland do as well as around the country, is charge non-residential properties based upon their measured impervious as multiples of the ERU, what a single family pays. And so I have an example here of an example property that's got 21,000 square feet of impervious. So under your current approach, they would fall into tier 2, which would say that there are 5 equivalent residential units, and they'd pay $113. But if you use the measured approach and you said, well, you've got 21,000 square feet of impervious, we divide that by 2,100, which is our equivalent residential unit, that would say that they're equivalent to 10 single-family homes. And therefore, instead of charging them $113 per quarter, they'd pay $228. And this approach would really address the wide range of impervious that you see on non-residential properties. There are some that would see a reduction in their stormwater charge because they're falling at the lower end of the tiers, and there's some that would see an increase, like this example, because they have a lot more impervious and they're falling towards the top end of that range. And so what this would do in terms of if you went to a measured approach, this would essentially increase the number of billable units on the stormwater side for non-residential customers by about 1,000 ERUs. And so essentially that would mean that you'd have more ERUs to charge. Under your current rates, if you immediately went to this approach, it would generate essentially about $100,000 more revenue than your current stormwater fees. And so finally, just to wrap up our recommendations, we are recommending that you don't do that this fiscal year, but that you consider it for next fiscal year, given the time and the notification and the updating of your billing system. But we would recommend that you consider going to this alternative structure in fiscal year 26. As I mentioned, it would have a wide range of impacts. There are a few properties that would see very, very sizable increases because they have a lot of impervious. And so we think it'd make sense to have some public outreach to those parcel property owners. And then ultimately, you'd also need to update your billing system to make sure that you appropriately bill under this new structure. And so I will turn it back for questions on stormwater.
I'm just looking at the first recommendation, and that, well, your recommendation for water and sewer are for 25.
Correct.
Okay, only stormwater's for pushing it out to 26.
Yeah, let me clarify. So we're recommending that you increase the stormwater fees as shown on slide 24, 15% for fiscal 25. So this would be the recommended stormwater fees. But because we were tasked with essentially looking at, okay, let's also look at changing the structure, a recommendation for the subsequent year, fiscal 26, would be when you take this up next year, after you've had time to process it, that then you would change the structure for 26.
Okay, and that's just stormwater.
Correct.
So your recommendation for water and sewer are the graduated increases that you outlined?
Correct.
Okay. Just want to be clear, they're not listed in the recommendations, but that's your recommendation. Thank you.
Oh, I'm not on mic. It's a lot to process. Can I go?
Yeah.
I think the public needs to understand this, and Jody, I'm going to need your help on this. Okay, so number one, we're dealing with an enterprise fund, right? So that's kind of like a, excuse my engineering reference, but sort of like a closed loop system. It has to support itself.
Correct.
Okay. What I see here, which is, and it relates to, I think, what Alderwoman Finlayson was trying to get at with the debt ratio or debt service. It does not appear to me that we have firewalls in place, for lack of a better word, on containing this. It seems like there's no check when we add capital projects. There's no check at that time to say, well, what is this going to do? There's no threshold that prevents an add of a project because it's going to increase the residents' portion. This is important because I know the whole budget affects residents, but this goes right to the residents' pocketbook, and they have to understand that the city is watching this. We can't just keep increasing debt service by adding projects. So is there any limit on debt service? Is there any math to this, Jody, that it doesn't keep increasing?
I think this is probably a question that Public Works is going to have to address. See, I think it's driven from what stormwater projects do we need to do to have a functioning, efficient stormwater system and take stormwater away, right? And treat it and whatever else you do and get it to the right places.
Are they given a budget? Are they given a budget?
So,
are they given, the parameters? How do they know? They'll no offense, but they'll keep adding projects.
So they'll have to, you're going to have to ask that question to them, because currently they're designing fixes, and I think some of it has to do with the requirements of the state, right? And I'm not even going to be able to use the right terms that they have to meet to get to a certain place where the stormwater is properly handled, treated.
MS4 requirements, is she speaking of? Do either of you have to come up and talk to it? Sorry, we might go over.
Yeah, and so that's what's driving the work that they have to do to get it to the place where it needs to be.
But I want to talk about the process, and you referred to firewalls. I'd use the term maybe a ceiling or a governor, right? What governs our budget in terms of what projects we're able to do, and I think it's shown right here on that. Maybe it's that fourth line down that says total capital expenses.
Wait a minute, I got to put on the readers.
We're back on page 20.
Okay, 20. Yep.
Right, and so right here we are essentially asking the city's permission to increase our capital expenditures. Mm-hmm. You can see those numbers going up by quite a bit, and that is what is driving those rate increases. So if council were to say, no, we're not going to approve that, this is where we'll cut. And then Betsy McCown can talk about the implications.
Yeah, so hi, Betsy McCown. I'm the city's stormwater program manager. Just to follow up and echo what Jody and Burr have just said, we are following mandatory regulatory requirements as per the EPA and MDE. What you have seen is, yes, we have been spending more money. We have my position that I'm in is a little over a year old. We are really getting a better handle on our stormwater program as per state regulatory requirements mandate us to. I believe, and David, please let me know if this is incorrect, but our expenditures did not exceed revenues, but did they this year? So it's not as if we're just ad hoc adding projects. We come to you with proposed projects and you approve them and then we implement them.
So it's in our court to make sure that you don't exceed the revenue coming in? Or did you just say that you do look at revenue coming in before you?
We, as per this process is when we do that. But the projects are already approved. So I follow my budget that you approve, right? And then that's how I go through and spend my money. As we do the rate study, we look at expenditures versus revenue to determine if we need to further increase the rate. What you are seeing here on the out years is essentially deferred maintenance on our stormwater system.
Right.
So that's why I'm expecting us to be spending more money on our stormwater system that has been neglected for many, many years.
Well, I think I can speak for my colleagues in saying that when we evaluate capital projects, we don't know at that time what that is doing to our debt service. We just don't know that, do we? Do we know,
We know that it's going to increase our debt service. We do know that. Maybe we don't know the exact dollar, but we know it's not a ceiling or maybe not a floor, but we do know it's going to.
And I think that's what you were trying to get to before. It's like, where is that? I keep using the term firewall, but it's like beep, 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 beep.
Madam Chair, that was your question. I was just trying to clarify it for everybody.
But do you know what I'm saying? I think what I heard you say, Burr, is you look at this and you just say, okay, revenue coming in? No.
No, it says that the total capital expenses are going from $540,000 per year, if I've got the units right, up to $2,280,000 in 34. So look at that bold line that says total capital expenditures is where we are projecting what it will take to catch up on this deferred maintenance.
Okay. I mean, I'm looking at it mathematically, and saying, okay, what's fixed, right? What's fixed here? And what are the variables? And what variable do we want to increase? And we're leaving the cost to the resident open-ended. We're just, I don't
know that I view it that way.
But convince
It's not.
us.
It doesn't. This is not open-ended, right? It is right there. It is a projection. This is a budget request, and we're being very clear about what it is we're asking for.
So are those projects there's need to have and want to have? I think Assistant City Manager can complete my question.
No, Vicki Buckland, Assistant City Manager. So I think what I'm hearing Burr say, which is correct, which is, so in the CIP process does identify where those bonds are getting paid out of, right? So you can see these are bonds that are going to hit the different funds, including the enterprise funds. But this is, in some sense, why the operating budget discussion and the capital budget discussion sort of go hand in hand, because there are some practical consequences for their daily work, right? And as Burr said, all of this is a request, right? This is a proposed budget from the mayor, now in your court to evaluate, but you end up evaluating those two pieces together because they do, in fact, work hand in hand. Here are the CIP projects that end up impacting this number, and do those two things make sense in relationship to each other, and is this something that you're willing to sign up for? And so I think part of what I'm hearing here is sort of a sense of someone other than you approved this. And that's not what's there, right? There's recommendations, and I think some strong recommendations for how to care for the infrastructure of the city. That's one of the performance measures and partly why in the performance measures it talks about, at this rate, how many years would it take for us to actually renew the infrastructure of the city? It's just that all this stuff fits together. And the CIP, the operating, this is one of the places where they intersect. if that makes sense.
All right, well, let me ask it inversely. What if we say, I'm being drastic, we don't want to increase stormwater, period, that's fixed. No increase to the residents.
So the consequence of that would be then now there's less money available for capital projects. You would have to now go back in your review of the CIP and decide what the consequences.
But I'm suggesting that we owe it to the residents to do that analysis before we raise the fee. And you're saying that the only time that the city council has the opportunity to look at this is during the budget process. And for, again, a lack of a better word, I don't know. I know I'm not smart enough to say, oh, we're going to exceed our debt. We're going to increase our debt capacity by X. I mean, I still don't have a very simple answer to, are there any firewalls here that alarm us that we are going to increase the residents' burden? What? Alderman Arnett.
Madam Chair, I think you are on the right trail, but I view DPW as sort of the cleanup crew. If you look at page 26 and you look at the work we're doing with the comp plan, as planning and zoning improves, they're the ones that approve the new projects a la page 26.
Yeah, I gotcha.
And if
And the
that does
mayor.
not, encompass the thinking about as we get more dense and we go up and we spread buildings, that's going to have a growing impact on the stormwater management.
Absolutely.
And so
Absolutely.
these are the good guys.
No,
These are the ones that are
I'm not. I'm just saying, unless
cleaning up.
noted otherwise, Alderman, I didn't mean to say what, but unless noted otherwise, they're going to do what is their, they've got mandates and they've got requests. So you got that going on, okay? So they're increasing that. Yeah, it's a finance question, so yes, Director.
I'm not, Finance Director Jody Dickinson, I don't think it is a finance question. You are inferring that we're putting forth projects that are not necessary. You're saying there's some mandated, there's some that we choose to do. I think what she said was we're doing maintenance. We're maintaining the system so it stays intact. And we have mandates also that we have to follow, and these are what they're presenting to you in the way of projects. I don't know what the projects are. They could tell you if there's any optional that we're putting in there that are just nice things we'd like to do, not things we need to do.
Right.
So I think that's where your concern is coming from, and they're the ones to answer that question. Right. Is there anything that's nice to do but we really don't need?
Right. In a perfect world, we would be presented with a capital budget categorized as need to do, mandated, nice to do, and then we can discuss, on an assumption that it has to come this way. We have to make an assumption. Look, we don't want to increase the residents' burden on this by more than 3%, or So okay, so you go with that, and then you look at this list for what is disposable, for lack of a better word, on the capital projects. I mean, I'm just very concerned that there's no.
So I'll turn it back to the project people to tell you how many nicey projects are in there.
Budget Manager Connolly. Sorry, Betsy. Ms. McKinnon.
Sorry, if it helps, I hear you. If it helps, for this particular fund, there's only 2 capital projects. And what has happened is in years past, now they have a dedicated stormwater team, and they've really ramped up work in the past year and a half, and going forward. So there was not a lot of spending out of this fund from a capital side in previous years. The 2 projects are the stormwater management retrofit project, and Betsy can speak on that, and the MS4 project, and she can speak on that as well.
So with due respect, Director, You should have responded. You should have said that. You don't.
I'm chomping at the bit. I've got the two CIP
that's it.
projects.
Okay, all right.
That
okay.
Katie just mentioned, open here in the CIP book. They're on pages 98 and 99.
That's a simple answer there that we can't, again, I look at it as what's fixed and what's variable without the residents picking up the burden, but there you've got fixed demands, right? Like we have to do that stuff. Ms.
It's an
McKinnon?
unfunded mandate from the federal government.
Well, that's a good way of saying, yeah.
Yes, and
Yeah.
so we don't have a choice.
Absolutely.
And that's the good work that they're doing.
Yeah.
They're following the federal mandates, and the federal government gave us the standards and the requirements. They didn't give us the money. And so guess who always picks up the tab? The residents.
Yep. Yep.
Yes, and everyone's correct here. I have a little bit of hesitation thinking about doing less because everything I've heard from other council members is do more. And I desire to try to do more, but also in a fiscally responsible manner. We are doing as much as we can to leverage grant opportunities. I think at the state and federal level, they also recognize that this is hard for local jurisdictions. I am in touch with all those agencies to also make sure that they are aware what these mandates do to us little people, the little jurisdictions. So we're working on that. I am trying to slowly expand our program. We have requested GIS positions spread across the enterprise funds, right? So I'll get a third of a GIS position. I'm highly doubtful that will fully meet my needs. I could use a dedicated GIS person. But again, we're trying to do it in a methodical way. There are only 2 CIP projects. We're not proposing a big increase on the MS4 one, but we are on the stormwater retrofit one. We just did an outfall risk assessment. Our outfalls are in major disrepair that could really, really cause a big problem to some of our major infrastructure. So we have to start addressing those. And yes, it's a bit deferred, but we're getting to it in a fiscally responsible manner.
Thank you.
And could you go ahead and give an example? I mean, we know the one, right?
Very soon you'll be seeing a new CIP project. There is a failing culvert underneath Hilltop Lane right at the dip at the Salvation Army. It's failing. We do not want that road to fail. That is going to be a big project. We're asking for a combination of stormwater and general funding to fix that project in a very, it's an emergency project.
Yeah.
And again, it's because of deferred maintenance.
Right. Thank you so much, Ms. McKinnon. We really needed to hear that. I don't mean to be an attack dog here, but I knew, so that's great.
No, it helps. These are great questions. These are great
just like
dialogue. It
picking
helps
on
for you
you.
to understand. It's one thing to say stormwater management retrofit project, but what does that really mean? We had the big sanitary sewer overflow in the August timeframe, and that was due to a failed outfall. Right. And so going through this methodical process of identifying where our risks are, identifying the projects and prioritizing the projects that address those risks, and then bringing that all together in the budget is what this process is all about.
Okay. Probably, I don't know if we have time for this, but is there the same logic with water and sewer?
Very much so. It's just that
Yep.
they are well ahead of the game here, right? With the big asset management plan that was put together, I think in about 2018 or 2019, we now have a very good idea of, in one concise document, what the age of our systems are and what we need to do in the next, I think that plan went through 2035. So that was we have a very defined plan there. In that asset management program.
Yeah, in that case, a lot of the requests, I assume, come from the council. We want ours first, and Eastport, right? Right. So we're right. So we're to blame here. But I bet I'll challenge you with this. I bet in the last 10 years or something, I don't know. Did we ever go through the capital budgets and say, hey, we can't afford this because it's going to increase the residents' fee? I mean, you weren't here 10 years ago, but you know what I'm saying? Like, it's already done deal. So
I don't think we have a choice.
Right.
We're protecting our infrastructure immediately, but we're protecting the bay.
Right.
That's why the federal government is saying, you've got to fix this stuff.
Yeah.
We don't want it all flushing into the bay,
Right.
including part of Hilltop Lane, but
Well, that's why I don't think we do, because they're all necessary projects. Isn't that a fair statement? I don't know, unless there's some wish to haves there. I don't know.
Madam Chair, I think we have been given this information annually, and we have made a conscious decision that there are some things that we cannot avoid. And many of these capital projects are things we can't avoid. Just like Ms. McEwen just mentioned, Hilltop Lane. It's going to come. Either we can plan ahead for it or we cannot. But we have not ignored the fact that our debt service has increased over the years because the number of projects that are on demand has increased. 2 years ago, we had 20. Director Vogel, I don't know how many are on your list now, but I would say it's probably a few more than that. And you don't have to count them out, but so we are meeting a demand even though it's unspoken. Staff knows it's in demand. We hear about it when the road fails or when the project, something fails. But these are required. So I wouldn't paint it as if we've ignored the increases in debt service. We count on it every year as part of our budget because that's a requirement. That's a service that we provide to the community.
Well, that was my point, is that, I mean, we've never looked at a capital project budget and say, we don't need that, or, Budget Manager Connolly.
Thank you. If it helps.
Yes.
Since I've been here, and currently the enterprise funds, we talk about them just in capital projects. The sewer fund has one project, and it's the sewer rehabilitation project. Water fund has 3 projects. It's water distribution, water tank rehab, and well house improvements. The growth has not been in the enterprise funds. It's been in the general funds, which is a separate conversation. But there's no frou-frou projects necessarily in these enterprise funds. It's just a necessary projects to be done. Go ahead.
Raising my hand, but the enterprise fund is the one that equates to the fee.
Absolutely, yes. I just want you to get, I hear a lot of like, it's grown, but these funds in particular that are impacting the rate study, there's not a lot of change in additional projects being added. It's just the consistent ones that are being done every year.
I think this is a great discussion.
So the costs have increased.
Can you come up as well? Yes.
If she has something to add.
Well, I think the same, it's very convincing that this is where where we know the need to haves are. I'd just like you to explain, as Ms. McKinnon did, the projects that you're on and the necessity for them and how you look at it.
Sure. Diane Doyen.
Sorry, Diane, to put you on the spot,
okay.
but yeah.
Diane Doyen, civil engineer. I'm focused primarily on those sewer projects, and some of the current projects I have are the Wittencourt Pump Station, which is in Alderwoman Finlayson's area. That station was originally built in 1967, and it was at the end of its useful life. And that's like a $1.6 million project. Even though it's a small station, all the components are very expensive, and it's important to convey the sewage out of that area. Other projects are, a citywide condition assessment, so we can take a look at the sewer lines and try to prioritize, in addition to our asset management program, which lines need immediate attention. Lately, I've been, and I'm continuing to install liners in the sanitary sewers. I've had some focus on some of the lines that are hard to get to, that are in easement areas along the water, with the thinking that we would rather get in there and work on those, inspect them, and then rehab them before there's an emergency. It's a lot easier to plan and figure out a way to access some of the manholes that are hard to get to. We have to go through a lot of private property to do that. So that takes a considerable amount of effort. And then within the process also of inspecting the lines, we come across maybe some sections, where we have to make point repairs, where there's a partial collapse or offset joints. And again, those things all take a lot of coordination, and especially if it's in the critical area or on private property. In addition, we have 26 pump stations, and they all have components that need to be replaced, such as pumps and
Can I ask a random question, real random? We just had a presentation from our IT director and talking about the GIS. Do you work with them on GIS? Where is that located then? Or do you both have one, GIS? Is there some efficiency in just having one versus two?
Well, right now, it's all located in the IT department.
Okay.
And we're asking for one for Public Works that will be
that's where that's
split
that's right,
between the enterprise funds, water, sewer, and stormwater.
Okay.
Just to be dedicated to, there are significant needs in each of these.
That's a great example then, that's that's for enterprise funds. Great.
Correct.
Yeah. No, this is a great discussion, because I went from the hysterical resident to to understanding, and I didn't pick on Director Vogel too much, so.
I have a quick question.
Yes, please.
Right. Understanding all of that, I just want to drill down to the numbers for a second. So slide 23, just to clarify in my mind, we're talking about the operating fund cash balance here, and assuming that we're going to take this 15% through 27, and then it says we can go back down in 28 to 7%. As opposed to last year in this same discussion, we were given a chart that said 7% through 29.
Streamlined.
So does your projection only include the percentage increases each year, but not include the expense of increased inflation? Or why am I last year sitting here and we were moving from a 3% increase to a 7% increase from the year before? I was like, okay, we can handle 7%. Now we're being told just 15%, so it's doubled again.
Yeah, I think that the main reason, and we do incorporate inflation, but if you go back even further, we were in a situation where, and was mentioned earlier in terms of just the level of spending. Year over year, we were assuming, okay, you're going to now start spending more of your capital in your budget in stormwater, and that wasn't happening. And so all of a sudden, with a new position and with you're actually now spending your budget, you're actually executing the projects, and that really hit in 2023 to where all of a sudden it wasn't status quo where you weren't spending the full budget, and therefore it drew down on the budget, drew down the balances basically to zero in fiscal year 23, and that's from where we're starting from at this point. So now, given the status quo and how you're operating within the stormwater fund, essentially need to increase the rates because of that, if that makes sense. So it's really a kind of a shift in terms of how Betsy was able to fully be engaged and execute the projects and things of that sort, if that makes
Okay,
sense.
so if you look at your magic ball, are we going to sit here this time next year and you're going to say we need a 32% increase?
No, hopefully not. Assuming we stay within these budgets, this should be, it shouldn't change from these forecasts.
Okay,
Yep.
because I also see on the slide that it says that from 23 to 24, we had a 10% increase in operating and management, but from 24 to 25, it's only 4% increase. So in some respects, it feels like in some areas, we're not increasing as much as in other areas. So
Yeah. It really comes down to the execution of the budget in terms of the, thinking that, okay, we're now going to ramp up, the expenditures are going to hit, and finally they did basically in 23. And therefore, now going forward, I think it's more of a, I don't think Betsy's going to back off in terms of what she's doing. So I think that this is more of an accurate and true forecast.
Okay. Thank you.
Yep.
I think, to your point, I think we might be underestimating really what the effect of, the escalation was this year. I mean, that was a jump, right? I think we're
Certainly.
underestimating that, yeah.
Yes.
Okay. All right, I think we have to talk refuse. I'm sorry to keep you. What about refuse? Oh, my God, yeah, okay.
All right. So the last
Oh, no increases.
last enterprise fund is the refuse fund. And just a little bit of background in terms of how the refuse fund operates. The city does contract out the majority of the services within the refuse fund. And as a result, the majority of the expenditures, it's about, 60, 70% of the expenditures are outside of the city's control because that's based on a contract. And the contracts do have escalators that have increased pretty substantially over the last couple of years.
How long contract, just how many year contract, just so we know what we're looking at?
We have a 7-year contract where July 1 will be beginning year 6
Okay.
of the 7-year contract
Okay,
with our
thanks.
current
So that's-
collection. I will say this, of our collection contract, we have about 8 contracts. We have disposal contracts with waste management. We have a recycling disposal/processing contract. We have yard trim contracts. We have other contracts for those large roll-offs that sit out at our operations center. So there are many different aspects to solid waste.
Okay. So, go ahead.
Okay, yep. And within those contracts, you do have escalators for fuel. And given the recent increases in inflation, the contracts have increased pretty substantially. So that's really having a big impact on the refuse fund. In terms of the total revenue requirements, it's about $4 million. You can see the vast majority of the costs are just operation and maintenance. 81% of the O&M costs are related to those contract services. And over the last 3 years, you've seen your O&M cost increase by about 20%, given the increases due to inflation. And so similarly, when we look at the operating maintenance cost and a forecast, we're currently $4 million in fiscal year 25. That's estimated to increase by about $1 million by fiscal year 34. You do have a little bit of debt service, very, very minor, in the refuse fund. So it's primarily, again, just the operating maintenance costs. And your revenues that you currently generate with your current refuse fees are slightly below your refuse expenditures. So if we keep them flat, don't change them going forward, similar to the other funds, we are seeing that divergence between revenues and expenditures. And so we're seeing a similar trend. Again, when we look at the refuse fund, we want to try to maintain 6 months of operating expenditures. We're above that right now. Without any adjustments in fiscal year 25, we'd be right at that minimum. We'd drop below it in fiscal year 26, and then in subsequent years, given the estimated increase in operating cost, you'd continue to see a depletion within the operating fund for the refuse. And so, as I mentioned, the refuse program expenditures are exceeding the revenues. We are estimating that they're going to continue to escalate going forward. And so we are recommending in fiscal year 25, excuse me, a 10% increase in the refuse fee. And then we think again in fiscal year 26, potentially need a 10%, and then it would trend more towards inflation in future years. But again, the recommendation for fiscal year 25 would be a 10% increase in the refuse fee. With those increases, we would maintain the cash balances. Again, in the future, we are building up some balance, so maybe you could back off in future years in terms of the increases, but given the recent increases in operating costs, we are recommending that 10% for fiscal year 25. And so what this looks like, just providing a little bit of background of where the refuse fee has been. At one point in time, the refuse fee back in 2016 was about $325. You actually reduced it. You had a really favorable contract at one point, renegotiated the contract in fiscal 2019. And since then, we've had to, given the escalations, we've had to increase the refuse fee going forward. So the refuse fee on an annual basis would be about $392 in fiscal year 25 with that 10% increase. And so finally, this is just a comparison. Given again, and we'll footnote this, that these are the current refuse fees for surrounding jurisdictions under fiscal year 24. Likely a number of them will increase their fees, but that 10% would increase it from $356 a year to $392 on an annual basis for your residential customers that receive the refuse service.
So, okay, thank you. On that, just so I understand, that fee is only paid by single-family residential on the assumption that multifamily and commercial have their own refuse companies. So can DPW speak to, is there anything other than inflation that you think is driving this? It's kind of an unfair comparison because, I mean, I would defend the fact that we need to keep this city clean and the density of the houses and all, but anyways, could you speak to it?
Yes, I can. So as far as staff, we only have 4 employees who work on refuse and are paid out of the refuse fund. Okay, so, clearly these fees are not very heavily impacted by staff costs. And as you saw, the debt service is very small. We're still paying off a gas collection system for the closed landfill, and I think we're contributing a bit towards the new facility because that's where some of that staff is located, and the 39 Hudson Street facility is split between enterprise funds too, as to the percentage of usage by each division. And all the costs have gone up. So what we have for fuel, we have a monthly adjustment in the contract, and it is exactly what Anne Arundel County's has also, just as a side note. And we've had this for years, and they've had it for years. And it's based on diesel costs, and it's a little bit of a complicated formula, but that is calculated every month, and diesel is costly. And then every year, the contract for collection has a CPI index related. And, for example, our disposal costs at for trash, in 2022, they were $61.50 a ton, and this fiscal year, they're $65.88 a ton. I mean, everything just keeps going up. Another thing we have in this fiscal year is we have some work to be done that is required by Maryland Department of the Environment for an agreement we have with them for the closed landfill, and we're hopeful that we may be out from under this agreement in future years, which could save some funding. However, having said that, since I told you we were in year 6 of 7 when we rebid the contract, it could go up more. I don't know. We don't know. I mean, we do a bid, and it's, what we get. And we are very pleased with this contractor. I will say they provide excellent service.
Can I jump in real quick? Can we go back to slide 35?
Yes, sir.
Which one?
35.
Slide 35. Okay. So when we're talking about the increases in expenses there, that's sort of the middle bold line, and we go from 4.05, 3.99, actually very steady state, and then we start seeing these 13-cent increases per year, or 0.13 million. So that's really very much in line with inflation there. The reason that the rates are continuing to increase as they have for the last 4 years is because we're still collecting less than we spend because we had a large cash balance.
Say that again?
We are we are collecting in revenue less than we spend. And you can see that right there in the very first column in FY25. Our expenses are $4 million, and we are collecting $3.3 million. So we're still burning through our cash reserves. Really very much on plan. I remember this exact discussion between Director Gerald and you folks a year ago. And so what we are doing is bringing up those revenues to align with our expenses and come into equilibrium.
Right, it's an enterprise fund, so we have to do that, right? Okay.
Right. You can be cash flow negative for a while if you have a large cash balance, which we had, and we're slowly bringing that down.
Yeah, and debt service isn't a factor here. Can I ask you this? How are you? Okay, having lived downtown, and with all the logistics, sometimes the pickups have to be rescheduled because there's restricted parking and. You live with the beep, 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 beep because they have to back up and you come back. Is that, or do they just have a fixed fee no matter what they do?
Well, we pay per customer, and in fact, when they started this contract, we had about 800 customers, and now we have over 9,000. So our customer base has grown, which means the city has grown.
And that's more revenue.
It is. So, that should equal out, but I'm just mentioning that. But that's how we pay them. And, if downtown collection day is Monday, and that only shifts if there's a holiday, and our collection people only get 5 holidays, which are the major ones that you might think of. No, and that, I think that the city of Annapolis is an expensive place to collect because it's a difficult place to collect. If you're in suburbia and everyone has a driveway, it's very easy to get to the cans. It's difficult for our collectors here, and they have to back down certain streets. We have so much water, so many dead-end streets that don't really accommodate a large trash truck. In fact, in our contract, we require slightly smaller trash trucks for that reason, which is they're smaller than I'm sure they would prefer because, a bigger truck doesn't have to dump quite as much. So, and just as a point I'd like to make is that every route, we have 4 different routes, but each route has 2 trash collection, 2 recycling, and 1 yard trim at a minimum. So we sometimes add if there's a heavy day, especially for during leaf season, we might have to add some, yard trim vehicles because it's a heavy.
I forgot to add, are they contracted to pick up after special events, the city buckets, the city, you know what I'm saying, down in the city?
I do. I understand what you're saying. So if it's a city-sponsored special event, so our crews we have 1 trash truck, okay, and they use that truck to collect, and we have 2 guys who drive it, and they're our dedicated trash crew, and we also they have a supervisor, right, and he manages day-to-day operations of our collection contractor, but then we have the 2 individuals who pick up the street cans. So does that answer your question?
It was just simply, is that the hired refuse company or is it internal staff that does that pickup of
the cans, the street cans?
Yeah.
Street cans are our staff, and then
our staff.
And we also have, on weekend days and often during the weekdays in the summer, especially in the evenings, we have, people, well, during the day, there is a person who's dedicated. He's a full-time employee, but remember we discussed the temporary employees? So that's a lot of them push the little carts around and empty the cans. And we have, we have recycling downtown too. So you have, they have to do a couple trips around. And when it gets heavy, I'm sure you've seen it, sometimes they can't keep up.
That's where I'm at, yeah. So that's an operating expense then. Okay. Questions?
I do have one quick question.
Yes.
Okay, because I keep comparing last year, I just have a question. Last year, when we were deciding 24 budget, the Annapolis current was 300 and the proposed was 324. But in this year, on slide 40, it has us starting at 356. Was that a miscalculation last year that we should have?
Yeah, the current is 356. So I don't know if it was wrong last year, but that is the current annual refuse charge for residential customers.
So last year's chart was wrong. Okay.
What do you mean wrong? What, wrong as far as,
$8 less?
what,
According to last year's chart, we would be starting at 324 this year, not 356. If I were to look at last year's chart. This year's chart, we're starting at 356.
I will certainly look back at last year's chart to see how it was miscalculated if it's.
Yeah, so it puts us from being sort of fourth in that comparison on page 40 to the top.
so were you saying we missed something last year?
Maybe. The numbers just aren't the same.
Yeah, no, I know. I thought it was mostly due to.
So I was trying to figure out, I was trying to save residential homeowners.
Yeah, it would have been helpful, I know the past is
$6.
past, but to Alderman O'Neill's point, if you had the column F fiscal year '24, because she's going back and forth, right?
Yeah, I'm just,
Yeah.
again, it's another fee, so our residents are now paying,
10% more.
10% more plus the water, plus the sewer, plus the stormwater, so
Yep.
we tout the fact that we haven't raised taxes, but we kind of did.
Yeah, that's why I
So-
thought it,
Sorry, that was just my aside.
yeah.
Do we have a slide that shows the total for water, sewer, stormwater, and
The total,
I can't find it in the
in the-
budget book, but that doesn't mean it's not there, but. it would be
Katie
nice
Conley,
to
Budget
show.
Manager, there's a section in DPW that shows a sample quarterly bill.
Page 88,
the budget.
88,
yes, and it's an overall 7% increase to a sample bill.
page 88.
All right, there you go. So that's an average, that's what you're looking for, Alderman Arnett, the average increase in a quarterly bill
About $18.
for example, yeah.
That's not terrible.
So before we conclude,
I do have a question.
oh, yeah, go ahead.
My question is, are any of the contracts, I know you said the refuse contract is open for renegotiations next year, year 7?
Okay, next year is year 6, and then
Okay,
we'll have
so
another year
in 2
after that. And
years.
it's not renegotiated, it's rebid.
It's just,
So it is just put out for any company to bid. And I know in the last couple, we had at least 5 companies bidding, and they have wildly different pricing. So, it's always, a little bit unknown. We make our best estimate, and then,
well, my question was, there's several other contracts also. So
Yes.
are they also open, and are there opportunities for savings on any of those other contracts?
so they're not, we generally negotiate for disposal with what we know is the most reasonable and closest option, because it's expensive, because we pay fuel, right? They have to drive to the location. And I will tell you, most people, or most municipalities in this entire area go to the same trash disposal and the same.
Millersville?
No, we do not go to Millersville. It's a lot more expensive.
It's what?
It's a lot more expensive. The gate rate to go to the county doesn't even take their trash to their own landfill. They take it to Waste Management at Annapolis Junction because it's cheaper, and then it's put on a railroad car and shipped to Virginia.
Okay, so there may be or may not be opportunities for savings on those
we're always trying. And,
Yeah.
our yard trim disposal, that's Prince George's County, and that was the best deal we could get. So we are always looking for any way to save money, but we're really limited as to where we can take trash, recycling, and yard trim. There aren't many options.
Okay. And last question, we pay their fuel cost? Whose fuel cost, I guess, is the question?
The collection contractor, there's a fuel adjustment monthly. I mean, you can imagine when they do their bid, they have to consider fuel. So,
I'm just
we
surprised
don't
that
put
would be separate.
the fuel cost isn't directly in there. They give us a cost per customer rate, but then there's a fuel adjustment that we do on every single bill every month. That's a little bit of a complicated formula, but anyway, because fuel is so variable, it could go down if the price of diesel went down.
Okay. All right, you're on it. Thank you.
To Alderwoman's point, does that go through general procurement?
Yes.
Okay. All right. So before we end, though, how do we? Oh, I'll get to that. You have a very substantial, very important recommendation that we change the fee structure, and I know that the council can improve. I mean, we can adopt fees, but changing the structure of the fee and what it's based on, how does that happen, Mr. City Manager or Director Dickinson? How do we implement his the suggestion that we change the parameters of the fee to against the impervious?
So that's gonna involve GIS. We have to, there's just, and I don't know how far along we are in that process, evaluating every property and how much impervious surface is on that property. And that's an exercise, and so to have that ready in a year, they would be able to more clearly state where we're at in that process about evaluating impervious surface on each lot. Okay. And
Yeah, that's what I'm getting at.
all of the stormwater fees every year are included in the fee schedule update that we do through resolution. And so next year when we come to you, we would change it to look like that new structure that you saw in the slide.
Yes.
So to get, if you're talking about how do we get there,
Yes.
there's a process they're going to have to do for each individual non-residential property to measure it, and then we have to feed it into our billing system.
Yeah.
So there's a process there, which is why it takes a while.
Of legislation, legality.
Just the rate schedule that you approve every year in the resolution, that will change what it looks like next year.
And to make this even more confusing and complicated, following a change in the fee structure, we also plan to introduce an ordinance, so probably a year or a year and a half from now, where we propose a credit for people who install stormwater management. Right now, there will not be any credit for stormwater management if we go in as planned, right?
Yeah.
But at some point, we need to incentivize people or reward people who already have stormwater management so that they pay, if you're treating 100% of your impervious area, you would pay, in all likelihood, 50, you would get a 50% credit, and that would align us to the county. So I think it's important that we kind of do both things.
At the same time?
Maybe ideally at the same time. So that may be an ordinance change. I'm thinking through this, a conversation that I've had with folks about a month ago, and actually that's something we would introduce in advance of next year's budget.
So the first step, it would be a recommendation from the Finance Committee, and, right?
So the fee schedule, so we would have a fee schedule, and then we would have an ordinance that gives a credit for stormwater management, kind of going through at the same time, so that both are implemented
If it's something that needs to happen in
simultaneously.
this budget cycle,
Not in this one we're in now,
okay,
but
so it
next year.
doesn't, okay.
But it may go to the mayor, the city manager, or the mayor, and then come to us as a council from the mayor's office.
Okay.
I suspect.
So two quickies. One, there is a recommendation that we move to ERUs in next fiscal year.
What's that?
The
ERUs.
equivalent residential units for the the non-residential for the commercial, is DPW going to follow up on that? And does that require a legislative change?
I think that's what we've just been talking about. That will change in the fee schedule for the FY26 budget.
Okay. The other question is, and Mr. Melanoff will remember it, and certainly Alderwoman Finlayson, is DPW going to compete for the trash collection bid?
I don't think so.
We don't have any equipment anymore.
But that's
It'd be, I think it'd be quite expensive.
Yeah, it's easy, but not inexpensive.
Alderwoman Finlayson?
My question, it goes back to page 88 that Ms. Conley pointed out to us, or Ms. Dickinson.
Yeah.
What I'm seeing is a tantamount to $100 increase for the year for all of the increases. I'm not sure those numbers match up with what we have in the presentation. But is that what we're talking about when you total it all?
Is it averages?
From stormwater, refuse, water, everything, for 25. Am I reading this incorrectly?
So, yeah, what this shows is the quarterly bill
Right.
for fiscal '25.
And it
So,
goes from 256 to 274.
Right,
About
which-
$25 a quarter.
right, right below it, it says 1792. So it's about $18 a quarter. So then you'd multiply that by 4, and that would be the.
So it's about that? I mean, is that what we're talking about when we're talking to the residents? We're talking about a $100 increase annually for all of these enterprises, these,
It's 72,
if it's $25 a quarter.
but it's 18 times 4,
Okay, okay.
so 72.
Your numbers are different, but okay. You subtracted 256
yeah.
from 274?
Okay.
17.
I know I'm an English teacher, not a
Sure.
math teacher, but I know
So
it's
if
not
you
$18.
Pull out a calculator, take $17.92, multiply by 4.
Okay. Well, but the point is that if we're talking about the sum total of increases to the residents, we're talking about $90 or $100 annually.
No, ma'am, 72.
Okay,
He's being exact.
yes, okay,
Yeah, just without the rounding, yeah, 72.
okay. Thank you.
Thank you very much. I think we're concluded on this presentation. I really appreciate, I think we had a very important discussion. I learned something, which always happens. So thank you.
Thank you. Appreciate the opportunity.
Before we conclude the Finance Committee meeting, let's confirm tomorrow's schedule.
Yeah.
So I have an official start of 1 o'clock for the continuation of the community grants assistant city manager, which should not be that long. And then we'll have a 3 o'clock. Did the TV studio respond, Kaylin, on whether or not FAC has access to be on the panel? They're still working on it? Okay. Okay. But regardless, I think we have to have. Okay. Thank you so much.
I have a quick clarifying question. Yesterday, Alderman Finlayson had asked community grant folks that in the past, they actually presented how their committee, how they came to their decisions, but they didn't have that opportunity this year because we were doing.
Oh, I think I asked that. Like, what was their process?
Right. Did you ask that question offline to be answered? Or?
I'm not sure what you're asking. If I wanted the committee to tell us.
Yesterday, you asked me, you said that in years past, the grant committee had been able to present to us their process, but they didn't do that this year because of our time constraints yesterday.
We went right into presentations.
Do we want that committee to come?
Yes.
Either before or after the final presentations to give us that update?
That is fine. I think what I was looking for, traditionally, there is a list of how they evaluate it. If there's a point scale that they used, how they allocated their points. Usually, that's part of the report.
But they haven't given a report.
Well, they haven't given
verbal
a report, yeah. I'm not sure it's in the report. They sent us the applications, but
Okay.
I didn't see a report from them.
So,
Miss,
yeah. So Assistant City Manager, I think what I'm hearing is that I think we can do it before the presentations. They'll be here, you know, and if we could have some summary of that. Either,
if we're meeting at, the committee's meeting at 11:30, why don't we ask that committee to come at 12:30? So they can have an opportunity to present. Because they've scheduled nonprofits beginning at 1, correct?
Right.
Correct. I can let Aisha know and Aaron.
it's really Aisha, not the organizations. Yeah. So Alderwoman Finlayson was suggesting we're going to be here eating lunch, so does Aisha want to come in? It would be a public change, though, to the meeting starting at 12:30 instead of 1.
I can let her know.
Can we do that, Kaylin? Can we have an official start at 12:30?
Yes.
Okay. Okay, and then they'll come in at 1. Okay. Okay. All right, so, Director Dickinson, yeah. I love how they switch the mic.
Sorry. Well, now, since we're talking about the schedule, city manager has mentioned that we have a work session scheduled on a Thursday in May to talk about amendments. It's during the Blue Angels Thursday. I don't know if that's practice or their,
Blue Angels is not on Thursday. It's Tuesday and Wednesday.
okay.
Sure it's not the 23rd?
Positive. I'll have a lot of really disappointed clients if that's the case, because I was for the 21st and the 22nd.
No, I'm sorry, I thought it was the 23rd because someone had sent me an invitation to their house viewing party. But you're,
So you're not going to be viewing
Thursday,
anything?
right?
It's a Thursday, and the item on the agenda is submitted budget amendments.
Yep. Again, this is per the resolution to discuss the submitted
By the
budget.
Finance Department for
Yep.
ideas.
It'll be an extended meeting from 2 to 5.
Starts at 2:00.
Yeah.
So what's the date when we present? Budget amendments are due when?
15th.
May 15th.
On the 15th.
Yeah.
And when is the full day council?
June 3rd.
Okay.
June 3rd, starting at 10
So what's
a.m.
happening on the 23rd?
It's a work session.
Going over,
You just go over your amendments in that work session.
Okay, and then again in June, we do the same thing?
Everybody.
it's a vote.
Oh, this is just for the Finance Committee? On the,
Yes, we're live.
it says budget
So
amendments created.
how we've done in the past, the 15th.
I'm sorry, Ms. Conley, this is my fault. I'm reading it now. It says by the Finance Committee, so, yeah. Yeah, the budget amendments by the Finance Committee, so that's not the full council. That's us.
Wait a minute, now I'm confused. What are you talking about, May 23rd?
May 23rd.
So it's a city council work session to discuss the submitted budget amendments created by the Finance Department from their designated.
I'm reading what it says on our calendar.
Can't have it,
Why is it called city council work
because
session?
if you're discussing it with the rest of your colleagues, then it's considered a city council meeting. So.
Ms. Conley, I didn't mean to shut you down. I was just saying that I didn't continue to read the, the calendar, but we're still having discussions about
Do
what
you need
this
me
means.
to explain?
Probably.
Okay.
Yeah.
Budget Manager Conley, if you don't mind, please. The amendments are due on the 15th. And the May date that we have, like all of council is here to discuss, it usually take about 2 minutes to discuss their amendment. On the 3rd in June, we then vote on them. And then at the next council meeting is when we bring forth the balancing amendment to pass the budget.
Thank you.
Good.
So we have to have our amendments ready for,
Well, we have to have our amendments in our report.
by the 15th. But this is when we present our,
We present our report May 13th.
okay, then what are we presenting on the 23rd?
You know, it's confusing. What May 23rd is a work session where every alderperson,
Just reading what it says.
you know, it's weird how it says created by the finance, created by the finance department. So correct me if I'm wrong, Budget Manager Connolly, but we get your amendments in by May 15th, so you have a run. Yeah. Excuse me.
I can answer the questions.
So, yeah,
You get them to us by the 15th, and then between then and that date, we are busy drafting them and forms that we need to have them in. So we get them ready for you for that next meeting where you can talk about them, talk about your amendments to the rest of the council.
It's misleading because it says created by the finance department, but what you've done is you've taken our amendments.
Yeah, they're created by us because we need to take what you
Right.
submitted and put it into an amendment form.
Yep.
So that's what that means.
That's our opportunity for each other person to present them.
If I may, there's a little bit of a process change for us this year. We've created a Google form in which council can submit their amendments to us. In order for us to be successful, we need information, certain information, right, to be able to draft the actual amendment.
Yeah,
So we're asking for all of that up front in this form. And we can go over that and walk through that form with everyone.
So when can we have access to the form?
So we are in the final stages of approving it. It's drafted. My team needs approval from the higher ups on it.
Okay. So
And then
just
we will
let
be
us
rolling that
know
out.
yeah, let us know, and then,
when they're ready.
yeah,
Yes.
okay,
So,
all righty.
thank you.
Okay. All right, I think we're done here. So can I have a motion to adjourn?
Motion to adjourn.
All in favor? Oops.
You should have, so if you look in front of your mic, you want to wait until after
Yeah, we can, is that okay offline? All in favor, signify, do I get a second? Oh,
Aye.
Aye, thank you. All right, yeah. It's, I'm